Welcome back. You're joining us for a deep dive into, well, a really intense and complex period. The major tensions on U.S. university campuses right after the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attacks on Israel. We've looked at quite a few sources, including an AI examination of campus conflict, civil rights, and free speech, which was interesting. And our mission today is really to unpack the core issues.
Yeah, to get a clear understanding of everything from the protests themselves, the concerns raised, to how universities and even the government responded, and of course the underlying legal and ethical tangles.
Exactly. So let's start with the activism. We saw this huge, dramatic escalation in pro-Palestinian protests, right?
Oh, absolutely. By spring 2024, you had encampments on, what was it, over 160 campuses?
Wow, yeah.
Students were demanding specific things: university divestment from companies linked to Israel, changes in institutional policies. It was very visible.
But then at the same time, and this is crucial, there was this deeply worrying surge in reported anti-Semitic incidents.
Yes, a really concerning trend. Jewish students on, well, numerous campuses reported feeling genuinely afraid, sometimes even feeling like they had to hide their identity.
That ADL statistic really jumped out, a 628% increase in anti-Israel incidents. And that includes assault, vandalism, harassment, just between June 23 and May 24.
That figure is staggering. It really highlights how fractured and, frankly, frightening the environment became for some students.
It really does paint a picture.
But, it's also really important to state that the pressure wasn't just in one direction.
Right.
Pro-Palestinian students and faculty members, too, they faced some pretty serious consequences. We're talking about university disciplinary action, suspensions.
And doxing, too. Wasn't that a big issue, often from outside groups?
Exactly. Malicious doxing campaigns. And for some international students or faculty, there were even reports of immigration enforcement actions being initiated. So the impact, the negative impact, was felt quite broadly.
So you have these intense situations bubbling up everywhere. How did the universities actually respond? It didn't seem like there was one clear strategy.
No, definitely not. The responses were all over the map. Some administrations tried negotiation, dialogue with the protesters.
But others moved much more quickly towards involving law enforcement.
That's right. Police deployments became quite common, leading to, I think the figure was over 3,100 arrests by mid-2024 across more than 60 campuses nationwide.
Over 3,000 arrests. That's significant.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder what options university leaders felt they had left.
Well, and that leads straight into the absolute core challenge they were facing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This fundamental balancing act. On one hand, you have First Amendment principles protecting free speech, even speech that might be offensive.
Right, a bedrock principle for universities.
But on the other hand, they have legal obligations under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act to prevent discriminatory harassment and ensure a safe environment for all students.
And drawing that line, figuring out where protected, maybe deeply offensive speech ends and actionable harassment begins, that seems incredibly difficult.
It is incredibly difficult and often very contentious. There's no easy test,
And that difficulty, that tension, it just exploded onto the national stage with that congressional hearing in December 2023.
Oh, yes. With the presidents of Harvard, UPenn, and MIT.
The questioning was intense, focusing exactly on how they were handling these issues, especially regarding anti-Semitism and calls for violence.
And the fallout was, well, immense. 2 of those presidents resigned in the aftermath.
It just shows the incredibly high stakes involved for everyone: students, faculty, administrators, the institutions themselves.
And zooming out a bit, connecting this to the wider political context, we also saw the federal government getting much more involved.
Right, particularly regarding Title VI.
Exactly. Our sources pointed out that, especially within the context of the Trump administration's focus, numerous Title VI investigations were launched. And these were often specifically centered on concerns about anti-Semitism on campus.
And the administration didn't just investigate, did they? They took some pretty forceful actions.
Quite dramatic actions, yes. The cancellation of, I believe, substantial federal funding for Columbia University was unprecedented.
Wow.
And warnings were issued to dozens of other universities as well.
But that approach itself became controversial, didn't it?
It did. Critics argued it potentially politicized civil rights enforcement. There were concerns about maybe a disproportionate focus on anti-Semitism while perhaps being less vocal or less active on issues like Islamophobia, which is also a rising concern.
So even the attempts to intervene stirred up more debate.
Precisely. It shows just how complex and multi-layered this whole situation was.
And through all of this, the protests, the incidents, the responses, the investigations, there's a very real human cost.
Absolutely. You can't forget that. The impact on the mental health and well-being of students and faculty on all sides was significant. Anxiety, fear, disruption to studies and work.
And just the erosion of trust, I imagine, within departments, between students and administration.
Mm-hmm. A definite erosion of trust in many campus communities. And beyond the human toll, there was also a huge strain on the universities themselves financially, administratively, reputationally. Managing these ongoing crises consumed enormous resources.
So as we continue this deep dive, we're really trying to pull apart these interconnected threads. The activism, the anti-Semitism, the Islamophobia concerns, the university actions, the federal role to give you, our listener, a clearer sense of what happened and why it's all so complicated.
So just reflecting on everything we've covered, it's undeniable that the months following October 7th brought, well, an unprecedented level of tension to U.S. campuses.
Yeah, unprecedented seems like the right word. And universities were caught in this incredibly difficult bind, weren't they?
Absolutely. Trying to champion free speech while also, legally needing to protect students from discrimination and harassment. It's a classic rock and a hard place scenario.
And it's just striking how you had these two powerful currents rising simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
The surge in pro-Palestinian activism, the encampments, the demands,
Mm-hmm.
and alongside that, this dramatic spike in reported anti-Semitic incidents, creating real fear for Jewish students. They weren't just isolated events. It felt like a fundamental shift in the campus climate.
Yeah, a real shift. And the way universities and the federal government reacted was, as we discussed, so varied.
And all over the place, really.
From deploying police and making mass arrests on some campuses to negotiating to the federal government stepping in and even withholding funds. But there was no consensus, no easy playbook, which maybe highlights just how tricky these situations are.
And when you're trying to get to the absolute heart of it, you keep hitting that wall.
Mm-hmm.
The legal and ethical difficulty of defining the line between protected speech and actionable harassment.
Exactly. How do you draw that line consistently and fairly? Think about some of the chants and slogans that became flashpoints.
Like Intifada, or From the River to the Sea.
Precisely. Phrases like that. Their meaning, their intent, their impact interpreted so differently, often causing deep offense or fear for some, while being defended as political speech by others. It's incredibly tough terrain.
And the human cost, we touched on it, but it bears repeating. Real people, students. Faculty experienced fear, anxiety, disruption. It wasn't abstract.
Not at all. And the universities themselves took a hit financially, yes, but also in terms of their reputation and that internal sense of community and trust. It put an immense strain on the whole institution.
It's interesting. Some of the analysis we looked at brought up this connection, sometimes called the what goes around comes around idea, linking university teaching, say, in certain departments, to the viewpoints and actions we saw playing out.
Right. The idea that what's taught in the classroom influences the discourse on the quad. It's a provocative thought.
Definitely. Though, the path from academic theory to protests or government policy is usually pretty complex, not always direct.
Oh, for sure. But it's undeniable that universities are places where ideas are debated, where values are shaped. And in this period, they absolutely became battlegrounds for these wider societal conflicts and competing values.
And we saw specific academic fields, like Middle Eastern Studies departments, come under intense fire, didn't we? Accusations of bias flew back and forth.
Yes, that definitely happened. It shows how these big geopolitical conflicts can really permeate the academic structure itself.
But it's also worth remembering, maybe for context, that universities have always been sites for debate, sometimes very passionate, very contentious debate about social and political issues.
That's a crucial historical point. While this moment felt perhaps uniquely intense, campuses as arenas for argument isn't entirely new.
So looking forward, based on the analysis, what are some potential pathways? What steps might help navigate this better in the future?
Well, several things seem to emerge consistently. First, the need for universities to develop really clear, consistently applied policies on speech and conduct. Clarity is key.
And ensuring due process, right, if disciplinary action is taken.
Absolutely critical. Robust due process. Alongside that, strong anti-harassment measures that are enforced fairly across the board, regardless of the viewpoint involved.
What about education? Proactive steps.
Yes, proactive education seems vital, creating opportunities for dialogue, even difficult dialogue, across different perspectives. And alongside that, principled leadership from the top administrators, setting a clear tone.
And tackling things like doxing.
Definitely. Concerted efforts to combat doxing and protect individuals from that kind of online harassment. Also, defending institutional autonomy, letting universities handle academic matters appropriately.
And maybe focusing enforcement more on conduct, specific actions, rather than trying to police viewpoints themselves.
That seems to be a key recommendation: focus on harmful conduct, not ideology per se. It's a subtle but important distinction.
So it all leads us to a final thought, really, for you, our listener, to ponder. Given how deeply embedded these conflicting values are, free speech, safety, political expression, identity, what does a truly well-informed understanding even look like?
Yeah, what does it demand of us as individuals and of our institutions when we try to navigate these incredibly complex societal challenges?
It's certainly not a question with easy answers. Something to reflect on as we move forward.
This is DigitView.